some of the origin of our season of Lent, why we take this time, this 40 days, stems back from the early church. And if you were here at 8 o'clock on Ash Wednesday, you might hear a little bit of a repeat, sorry. But Lent was created for those preparing to be baptized at Easter. And it's a more intense moment. They'd been preparing for a while before that, of course. But as Easter approached, it grew in intensity and began to take on things like if you're at a parish and they had the RCIA or OCIA, they would be doing some different things called scrutinies, which sound kind of painful, but really are an expression of the faith in baptism that even precedes it. That God is already working in healing and purifying ways even before we're baptized according to the rituals. And so there's a purification prior to baptism in this rite of a series of rites that is ultimately a more intense way for these folks who are preparing for baptism to arrive at Easter in a state of readiness. And I suggest that the church has kept this not only for those who are preparing for baptism, some of whom we might know, but for us who are preparing to renew our baptismal promises at Easter. And I'd like to just read to you a few things from that time. I don't want to skip too far ahead, spoiler alert. But just to remind us to what we're preparing for, there'll be a prayer acknowledging kind of what we've been through throughout the Lenten journey. And as it was concluding, it asks us to renew our baptismal promises. So I'm not asking you to say anything, just to listen. But the first three questions that you will be asked at Easter will be, do you renounce Satan? Second question, and all his works. Third question, and all his empty show. And we respond. Yes. And then we enter, thank you, and then we enter more deeply into what we do believe and profess. So I suggested to those on Ash Wednesday that one of the things that could help us during Lent in our preparations in this more intense moment of preparations for our renewal of our baptismal promises is to focus on something that probably isn't very one of the most popular parts of the liturgy, but the profession of the creed. Because we say in there what we believe, and that's ultimately what we're affirming in the renewal of our baptismal promises, so that as we receive the blessing of the water on us at Easter, we enter more into the fact that this isn't just what happened way back when we were infants, or perhaps for us as adults in RCIA, OCIA, but it's really a life that we live, baptism, and requires of us some knowledge. And I sense that some of that is here in today's scriptures, some knowledge about why Jesus wanted to communicate to us and help us to be able to name ourselves as a son or daughter of God. That's what ultimately he's being challenged here on. The devil is saying, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God. And Jesus shows us what it means to be the Son of God in a way that ultimately is saving for us and helps us then to name ourselves as children of the Father, so that as we move forward, we can have the same confidence, the same assurance, the same grounding in the truths of the written word, but more importantly in the person, Jesus Christ, who is the Word. And so we don't have to fear. That's one of the most common features of our scriptures from start to finish, is the statement, be not afraid. So I hope that that's what describes us as we enter Lent, and that we're not afraid to grow more and more aware and maybe have a sense of our sin, not because sin is pleasant or I want you to feel depressed, but because being a child of God allows us to approach our sinfulness in a unique way, that we are only aware of it because Jesus is showing it to us, and he's showing it to us not to make us feel bad, I trust, but to say that he knows where we need him. because he's been through temptation. He knows how it feels and didn't trump that with his godly power, but welcomed and was faithful to the Father in a way that has salvific, saving effect for us. So that's what we say when we enter into baptism, or someone helps us to do that as a child, is that in being baptized, we recognize that being joined to the death of Jesus, that death would have no more power over us. So that's a pretty confident statement. And one that Jesus, I trust, wants us to see working throughout these days as we see what's happening in his life, why he didn't take up military arms, why people were so disappointed that he didn't do that, because they thought what was happening was he was failing. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to do as the Son of God, because that image for those in his day had a sense of power, and that this would now be the end. But we realized that hadn't happened. That's not how it worked out, and that Jesus saved us in a way that now allows us to be and live every moment of our lives as sons and daughters of the Father, confident that we can stand before temptation with the strength that is ours in Jesus Christ in a way that we don't have to worry about that, as Jesus, in a very clear and precise way, stood upon the foundation of his relationship with the Father and moved forward, not away from the cross. So we enter into a life of intensity during this 40 days, and it's not going to be easy all the time, but nonetheless we are given the assurance that the Father is faithful to us, has made this promise to us in Jesus Christ in a way that I hope will help us approach this with confidence, so that we begin to think about our baptism a bit more regularly. I can tell that some of the friars and I, we are encouraged often to read the rule and the vows that we professed as ongoing formation of faith. I'd like to suggest that we do that too, that we might get a copy of the baptismal ritual or somehow see the prayers online and see what was it that I promised there, or what was it that was promised for me. The same might be true for a married couple. When was the last time you thought about or read your marriage vows? Those weren't just for your wedding day. That's for your life. So is our baptism. And it's a commitment of God to us, who then allows us and calls us to commit ourselves to him. We couldn't do it without his love, without his support. He's showing us, wanting us to be connected to this truth of our total dependence on him. That's what he revealed as he withstood the temptations of the devil in the wilderness, was his total commitment to the will of the Father. So there's our invitation, and perhaps something that we can reflect upon during the Creed, what we believe. And so that as we get towards the renewal of our baptismal promises in 40 days or more or less, that we'll be able to enter into it in a way that says, okay, here I go. I'm diving into Lent now so that I can dive into Easter. And that this challenge, this sacrifice, is really the climbing the mountain of Easter. That we're going to add some sacrifice, not because sacrifice in itself is pleasant, but because it opens up a path to the saving power of Jesus Christ, which we witness today in his fidelity to the will of the Father. So perhaps that might be something for us to reflect upon as we acknowledge Jesus' invitation this Lent and to say, okay, maybe I've never thought about that before, or didn't realize that I had to reflect upon my baptism. But now I sense it's one of the commands of God, for that's what we proclaim by being here, is that we are sons and daughters of the Father, united with Jesus in his sacrifice and love, uniting our sacrifices and love with his for the salvation of the world. That's a tall task, but one that we don't have to do alone, and that Jesus invites us to join him in during this holy season. May we stand as children of God, children of the Father, in courage and in peace like our Savior before us, competent before any temptation, that we can remain true to God's word in a way that will help us proclaim this message to everyone that we encounter, that this is true fulfillment.